Welcome to part 7 of our series Unlocking Webex CCE with TTEC Digital. It's the weekend. I've got the hat on, but don't let that fool you. We've got some business to take care of today. Before I get started, just a quick reminder on who I am. My name is Nathan Galloway. I'm the Chief Architect of TTEC Digital's Cisco practice. Okay, so you might have saw on that intro slide there, the topics are reporting and reporting API. This is a perfect complement to the last part where the title of that was a connected agent experience, and I was talking about who and what, and then I had the term Omnichannel in there, but you might still have some questions. I'll get to that here in a second. Let's just look at today's topics real quick. I'm going to talk about contact center data availability and challenges we face. Then I'm going to give you two demonstrations. The first is going to build off what we saw last time, and the second is going to be an API for our reporting. And we'll talk about that more as we get later on here. Again, before I get to the demonstrations, just want to highlight, really what our pain points are, or problem areas are, and the reason for this kind of reporting and reporting API section in our overall series. So here's what you should know out of box. Webex CCE holds incredibly rich data for both the IVR and the ACD. The schema of this has existed for 20 plus years. It's grown, it's hardened, it's mature. There's not really any piece of data that you should need out of your contact center that isn't available via the database. That's not to say that it's all there unless you do things in the right way. So some of that was, is kind of a little bit of the point of today. But long story short, you've got the data, and then this being enterprise-ready software, you can have access to that data. You get SQL access. You can do anything you want in front of that. Now, that can be a plus or a minus on this product. I think for the folks who are looking for something a little bit more out of box, it probably becomes a little bit of a minus. So you do have access to the data. I just don't want there to be anything unclear about that statement. Let's get to the challenges. So even after the previous part that I did in this series, you might still be saying, Nathan, I don't know how my contact center has visibility to FCR and omnichannel data. So I want to clear that up. I purposely didn't cover that. I just wanted to stay focused on the agent experience last time. Now I'm going to show you that today. Next is, we have multiple IVR reporting databases. What we find with this is that, in some deployments, a smaller deployment, 3,000 IVR ports or less, you're only going to have one IVR reporting database. So you don't really have this kind of challenge of consolidating that data. But for our larger enterprise customers, they most certainly do. And what I've found is that this data is just not. It's not in a Microsoft SQL database, so you might even have an even more difficult time, accepting that, embracing that, and ultimately taking advantage of that. Meanwhile, there is rich data there, and that data is probably becoming a little bit less critical as I've moved the majority of my IVR applications out to become virtual agents, and I no longer have 90 IVR applications. I just have those 2 or 3 I keep talking about. But you may not be there yet, and you may have data that you want to access in those IVR applications. So we need to make that more available. Lastly, sometimes for direct SQL, being able to hit things with, a SQL query is just not an option without having to build in some middleware. And I think more times than not, when you're trying to, outside of pulling it into another database, you probably do need that middleware, and this data can be used in way more ways than just querying it and displaying it in a report. So we got some challenges to address there, and hopefully I'll cover all 3 of those challenges and hope in even a little bit more as we get into these two demos. All right, let's have a look at the first scenario or the first demo I wanted to get you through. This scenario is the exact same that we looked at last time from an agent perspective, but I need to show you how it ties in to the omnichannel and the FCR conversation, which is ultimately what we need to get to out of our reporting, right? Most of the KPIs that you're looking for just exist natively within Cisco, but what people fail to recognize is that a KPI like FCR requires more than just the contact center, unless you've gone, rogue and you have your system of record or your CRM inside of the contact center. I don't really see that being the place of the contact center. But FCR is certainly an important metric to the contact center. We have to get there somehow, some way. Well, let's go back to this agent experience. And again, if you remember last time, I kept talking about not wanting to crack open the console so bad and just show you all of this rich data that was getting sent over to the CRM. Well, here we're going to take a look at it in the opposite direction, and the data now and how that's being provided into our contact center database, so we do have the ability to report on this stuff. So again, what we're looking at here, I've got a chat that came in. I chatted with this customer. I decided to escalate that call into a voice call. So again, omnichannel, we switched channels. Let's actually stick to the most basic part of that, the omnichannel piece, because we don't need the CRM or the system of record to help us with anything there. We've got you covered from a contact center perspective there. You can absolutely go into the detail of these applications and see the linkage between the various dialogues that existed on what I call the same task, but you could look at it as the same interaction. And I just want to prove that to you right here by showing you, I'll scroll down just a little bit. This is kind of let's call it the data structure of our task element. Inside here, you can see that we have two dialogues. This was the original dialogue sitting here. This is our chat and email. This is our voice dialogue. So the problem with on Cisco is if you are on the same channel and you start conferencing and moving things around, you have that link is already there. They're all associated by the same keys, and there's really no hardship. The problem is the switching channels, and that's what this term omnichannel. So I would just want to give you an idea for what that would be like, where here I've got this first dialogue that happened, and inside here I can see all the data that was associated with that. The most important piece of data that I'm going to show you here is that this chat, let's say, had a key that would tell me if it was present on any other interaction that these two were related. So whether you're using ECE or Webex Connect for chat and email, you with Cisco, you have the ability to bring your own channels. All that you would need to do is make sure every single interaction has a key like this, right? And it's really easy if we're using ECE to use ECE's key out of box. But what doesn't happen by default, and what we've done here with task management, is take this, and I'll prove this to you here, my voice dialogue. Scroll into this. I'm going to show you that this key now exists on this different dialogue on a different channel. So I'm not going into reporting from the sense of like, the reporting guys got this stuff covered. This is easy. Once you tell them there's a key there and they've got the detail records already, that's easy, right? And another thing I'm not going into today is CUIC operational contact center reporting. That's got you covered. CUIC is absolutely great out of box. Just from a contact center reporting, you need to customize or create some specialized reports or report templates. You can do all that. So I'm not covering that in this series. I'm focused really in on where there are gaps and how do we address those gaps, this being one of those gaps. So that's kind of part A, this linkage now it was great last time that our agent had a, good experience, and I talked about what would happen if they transferred that call around, or maybe that call didn't go to the customer, it was to their supervisor, and that supervisor getting an immediate screen pop and having immediate insight. Those are all other values of what I had shown you here, but now taking that to the reporting end, we now can tie our omni-channel back together. So again, you should look for that out of your Cisco Webex CCE contact center offering. Now let's go to the part 2 of this. I spent a lot of time last time talking about the who and the what, and being integrated with the system of record in a way that that gave the contact center visibility into what was going on there. So if you think about when we did, we brought in an interaction to start, we had a phone number, and that was all we knew about that customer. We took that phone number, we sent it to the CRM, and this is what most people have been doing for the last 30 years. They send that phone number to the CRM, and they create a screen pop for their agent. But then the contact center has absolutely no clue what that CRM or system of record did. The problem that creates is that other system is what's responsible for telling us the what on the case. And from an FCR perspective, we care about, and FCR meaning first contact or first call resolution, the contact center needs to know what that was about. Otherwise, it's not going to have a way to tell you, well, did this person have to call back in or chat back in or email, whatever, 15 more times? So that's where this what really comes into play. So again, you can see the what, which is in our system. We're using this variable right here, and that's tagged on all these records, right? So we can easily, uniquely identify all of the unique interactions that are happening here. What is extremely important, and it's critical that the way that you integrate with your CRM or your system of record is that you can ask this, you can tell the system of record the who and the what, but you can also ask it. When you don't know that, you have to get that back. Now that ID, right, for the what is stored in our database, and from there anything is possible. I talked about what the reporting guys can do with their magic, right? That becomes a very trivial piece. Their problem today is they don't have that. So again, if you're wondering why you don't have FCR, this is why, and you can correct that with what I'm showing you here. I'll take you one step further. Go back to the first 4 sections of this series where I talked about we need to spend more time on things that create value for our business. Well, I watch new projects kick off with customers on any contact center technology all the time, and they do stuff like spend the first 6 weeks of the project planning out how the phones are going to work and how the network's going to work. When that's easy, right? What I would do in the first 6 weeks of my project is map out how I'm going to ensure that I minimally identify the what on every single interaction that comes into my system, and so that is the tie-in between your system of record and this contact center product. So to have that, now I can do really anything I want. And I'm talking about it today from a reporting perspective. What it's really, the driver behind that is the keys that are in the database now that provide that relationship for me. So this is yet another building block, because later on I'm going to want to do way more from a data perspective in terms of what gets logged or visible to my agents, what goes in the data warehouse. If I come into contact with a transcript, a sentiment score, survey results, all things that contact centers do, right? I don't want to store them in my contact center. I think I've beat that to a pulp, right? That's not where customer data should go. But if I don't know where to associate those things, then I'm lost. So that's kind of from an FCR perspective, I really look at the what, but from a bigger picture perspective, having both of these things available and being able to now, I have a piece of data, maybe it didn't come directly from my agent or the agent desktop, I'll be able to take advantage of those things because I've always got this association that exists in my database, so I know exactly what to go out and do with the data that I come across. Okay, that's part one. Let's jump over to the reporting API as our final demo of the day. Reporting API. So with generally how I pursue value add to the Webex or really any contact center offering, I try my very best to avoid anything that would create additional infrastructure in an offering. This is one scenario on Cisco that I cannot avoid it. So what you're about to see is a TTEC Digital value add piece where there are components that have to get deployed somewhere here. Got a lot of different options to handle that. I just want you to know about that up front, where it's like everything you've seen me do from a task management perspective, the UC and the CC config, stuff like that. And it can all run natively on the system. So we do have an add-on component here if this is of interest to you. But I think it's so critical to what your needs might be that have to show it. So let me get logged in here and give you an idea what this looks like. Now, there's an administration side of this that I'm not going to show you today. That's basically where you set up your connections for the reporting API to the back-end databases that this will interact with, primarily your contact center database, your ACD database, your IVR database. This is a user side of this where I can come in here, I can add new users for my organization. Really, again, there wouldn't be a front end to this interface if you ask me. If there wasn't a need to supply some sort of UI for giving people access to generate tokens, add users, and then view API docs. So that's why the front end exists here. Otherwise, this would be purely back end. At the same time, let me show you how we use it. So come in here, I say I want to configure a new token, and we'll call this, I actually created this one earlier when I was on an earlier record session, but I'm going to give this, we'll put a 2 at the end of that because I'm going to get a one-time token in this scenario. And just going to copy it to my clipboard. Realistically, I should write this down, store it, if that's the way that I'm using this. These are kind of like personal access tokens. There are other ways that we can authenticate to this, just showing you the most simplistic way. Okay, so now that I have that token, let me get to the meat of this. Within the reporting API, we have created roughly, let's say 70 plus APIs, and you can see they're broken down from a documentation standpoint, just kind of logically in how they get used. And well, let me cover why we did this. I talked about the challenges earlier. Let me start with the first challenge where sometimes just having SQL database access isn't enough. You would have to do a ton of extra work to integrate this, and I really look at this from two perspectives, two primary use cases for customers to come in and leverage this. Use case number one. Yes, you've got your operational reporting with CYC, and you can tap into those databases. You got stock templates. You can create your own report templates. Do all that. But what about when you want to do more with your data? That becomes problematic with just the SQL access, again, without having an extensive professional services effort. So what this can do is give you an API that you could leverage with your data warehouse tool. Think along the lines of like Google BigQuery that pulls this data in via API, ultimately sticks it alongside all your other data. Then you have your business intelligence tool. If I'm sticking with Google technologies, let's say Google Looker, and Google Looker ultimately allows you to manipulate, display that data in very, very powerful ways. So again, most enterprises these days are using CYC, or the Intelligence Center, for their contact center operational reporting, but on top of that, they've got their enterprise data warehouse. They're trying to really understand every angle of their business, whether that's their contact center data, their customer data, or anything else, right? And so to be able to pull that into your data warehouse and analyze it. That's kind of use case number one here, just kind of pulling out the raw data so you have access to it. The API makes that really, really easy. Part two is routing. On digital channels, even if you're using like Webex Connect, you're probably going to come across, even in the most basic, let me give you the most basic form. I just had somebody start a chat with me, and now I want to decide if they need to go to a virtual agent or a human agent. So I'm going to look at the skill group data and see if I've got anyone logged on. I could look at that and look at anything else. I'll show you that as my example of the ACD data actually right now. So those are the two use cases. Let me just show you how we use this. I think you probably already get it, but we'll just show it live in action rather than me kind of hampering on about how great this can be. I think that you probably get all that. So the example I was giving there, skill group, I've got a routing decision that I need to look at to determine if somebody's going to go to my human agent or my virtual agent. So I'm actually going to come down in here and define skill groups. So you saw me post in my authorization key. Now from here, I can take a look at my skill group real-time table. I can say try it out. And this is all Swagger based, right? And we did this for just the purpose of making it extremely easy to consume, get your queries or your API calls right, understand what you need from a parameter perspective, what the responses will look like. So here I'm just going to plug in the ID of the skill group that I want to look ahead to, and I'm going to execute that. And here's my data. What's really nice about this is from a response perspective, it's following the database schema. You're really getting what you would get out of this had you have run this a SQL query natively. So you follow along with what all these fields mean just by looking at the database schema for contact center enterprise. But the example I was giving, logged on. Oh, I got 0 people logged on. Probably a good idea that chat goes to my virtual agent because I don't even have somebody logged on to handle it. Now, you could look at other things in here. How many have calls answered have I had the last 5 minutes? Again, I'm just giving a really basic example of how the API might be used in that type of look-ahead routing. So another really easy example of this, and we'll talk about, and that's more of a real-time kind of example. The data warehousing example takes us into historical. So maybe your data warehouse needs visibility into all of your skill groups, right? Go along with the skill group historical data, right? So I'll just show you all the skill groups we have in this system. So this is exactly what the system would do. Did I not pull that? Oh, sorry, I'm on enterprise skill groups. I don't have any of those in my system. Anyhow, so let me try this out. I'll show it to you just because I started down this path. Hate little hiccups like that, but showing you all the skill group and configuration data that you get to. So you're pulling in your historical data along with your configuration data into your data warehouse. Do what you want with it from a business intelligence side of the house, or anything else you need to do with it. You also have access to the real time that you could use to make in routing decisions. I'm not saying you can't use historical data in routing decisions either, but you need this contact center data available to you via API, and that's exactly what we're doing here with the reporting API. Okay, so last challenge I talked about, the IVR data. I think that people just with SQL access, they don't make enough use of this data today in all the different scenarios they could be using it. They come across a hardship and they just throw their hands up and they say, this cannot be done. I think that starts to take away from that, even on the ACD side. On the IVR side, I see people with even more challenges in that it's even harder to get at that database. It's not a Microsoft SQL Server database. You could have more than one of them in your deployment based on size. Meanwhile, I talked about there's lots of really, really good data here, and to see them sit there and never get used, like, hear me out. Take me up on this bet. If you've got any sort of IVR applications today, your existing customer, and just pull this data into your data warehouse and start looking at it. And you will see that there is rich data in here that tells you something. I don't know if it's going to create value, but it tells you something. And so that's one of the other things I really love about the API is that even if you have multiple reporting databases in your deployment, the reporting API is going to do all that consolidation for you, give you what you asked for back, and again, you just don't have to worry about it. I'll just show you a quick example of it. I'm not going to do anything fancy here. You can see that on all these, we can paginate records so we're not returning enormous result sizes. We can sort on different columns. It's, others have other fields. This one, pretty raw. But let's just go in here and I need to click my try it out button, and I'm just going to execute that. And here's all of my IVR call data, right? And again, I'm not going to go down the path of, where there's secret data in here that, will bring more value into your application, but just to know, hey, this call came in, visited one app. Here's an Annie and their DNS, the start date, the end time. Now kind of scoot back a little bit. Didn't mean to click on that. Start to get down into our VXML sessions and what happened in each of those individual applications, right? There's just a lot in here. You need a better way to have access to it. Okay, I'm going to wrap there. I'm going to go back to enjoying my Saturday, but really hope you enjoyed part 7 of our Unlocking Webex CCE with TTEC Digital series. This was reporting and reporting API.